Well, welcome back to the Finding Something Real podcast, friend. This is your host, Janelle Wood, and I'm very excited because today we're talking to a returning guest that we love who's been on this program a few times, and I'm so grateful she's here again. The last time she was here, she was speaking with my niece, Noelle, about science and beauty, and it was a great conversation. But before I introduce her, I want to say hello to some familiar faces that are back on the podcast today. I am joined by my three co-hosts today. That's Sarah, Anna, and Christie. I just wanted to say hi to each of you. Hi.
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 I'm so glad you're here. I was telling our guest today that I didn't know if you were going to show up. And maybe it's because all the craziness happening in life right now. As we're recording this, the holidays are coming, and we're doing our first fundraiser for Finding Something Real this Friday, which is crazy. And so my brain has been everywhere else. So the fact that you all are here, I'm just so thrilled, and I'm really grateful for this conversation we're about to have. So thank you for taking time and being here. Um, Today's special guest is someone that I would consider a friend of mine. She's just become a real sweet presence when she shows up here. And I know life has been changing for her recently, so I can't wait for her to share more about that. She loves science and I think if I remember right, wanted to be some sort of rock star or something. You were into, you'll have to remind me what that story was. I know you and Noelle connected over punk rock stuff last time you were here, but Xandra Grieme, welcome back to the podcast.
Hey, Janelle. It's so good to be here. And I was a rock star.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm just kidding. I thought I was a rock star. I was awful. I was a front man of a heavy metal band throughout college. So that's what we were geeking out about.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. What color was your hair during that time?
It changed colors pretty frequently. I did like the black, just usually dyed it black. I had like a faux hawk kind of thing going on.
No, you did not.
Oh, yeah, I did. Oh, yeah, it was fun. Those were the days, Janelle. Those were the days.
And now what are you up to? What are your days like today, these days?
Oh, very different. I don't know if they could be more different. I have a 6-month-old baby, and she is definitely a rock star, and she can shout really loudly. So she's just now finding her voice, and every time we go somewhere new, it's super fun because she needs to try the acoustics of the new place. So, someone's new house or whatever, a gathering, she'll be there shouting her little lungs out, which is really funny. But anyway, so she takes up a lot of my time, and but babies are so much fun, and she makes me laugh every day. So.
Yeah, and it sounds like this one has quite the personality. So
Oh yeah,
maybe she will be a front person for a heavy metal band someday.
No, she won't. She definitely will not. She will not go down that. I went down that path, so she wouldn't have to go down.
Well, Xandra, thank you for taking the time to be here. I know you have a lot going on. I remember those days, and I know how exhausting they can be. And anyway, I really appreciate it. You've been on here before. Why did you come back again?
Well, you're 100% awesome for one thing. So hard person to say no to. I really like the format. I really like how you create a space where people who come from very different backgrounds can meet each other and find common ground, and also ask the hard questions and talk about differences in a way that's really healthy, not in like an aggressive or debating kind of style, but more just in a healthy dialogue. And I really enjoy the chance to learn from people who think differently from myself and hear their stories. I think everyone has a story to tell, and everyone has something that you can learn from them. And so I really love the space that you've created and how you've used it. It's been a huge blessing to me, and I think many others as well. Yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you. No, God's been gracious. I'm really grateful for the girls that are here today, and I don't want to waste any more time talking when they can be. But Sarah, I'm going to turn it over to you. Xandra, obviously, I shared a little bit about your background with science and the things that you love. Are you still with the Museum of Creative Beauty, or Yeah.
No, I'm not with
Okay.
the museum anymore. I actually got laid off 8 days before I had my baby. So that was really interesting timing. Um, yeah, anyway, we could talk more about that later. But I'm just writing right now. I'm writing and I'm picking up some projects. I'm working on a curriculum for a different ministry, and I've got some
Mm,
speaking engagements coming up. So that's keeping us going for now.
that's awesome. That's awesome.
So buy my books so I can
Yeah.
feed my baby, please.
Perfect. We want the links for all of those things. Will you send them
You
to us?
got it.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Sarah, it's all you.
Okay, here we go. Xandra, thank you for being here. I was listening to the podcast that you've done before with Noel this morning and just really appreciated your gentleness and your perspective, your intellectual integrity. And I would love to just get into the creation story a bit and evolution and your perspective on how we understand scripture in accordance with science and what we know about the world.
Mhm. Awesome. Would love to dig into that with you as well.
Okay, so could you give me just your idea on what you believe about the origin of creation and evolution?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yeah, I thought we were gonna like introduce everyone. Yeah, absolutely. Um, so basically, really quick, do you have a background in like Christianity or religion at all?
Yeah, yeah, got my Awana
Oh, all right. There
Awana
you go.
shirt.
Represent.
I yes, I grew up in the church and have been a Christian the past 5, 6 years now, but have really wrestled with a lot of questions and doubt. And I would say I definitely related to a lot of what you said and a lot of what Noel said in the podcast that you've done before of just like really loving the mystery and not wanting to like give up the unknown that that we just don't have this final like 100% knowledge of God or of reality. Um, but I would say I where I would differ is that I feel committed to the Lord, but I want to know that He is who He says He is, and I want to know how that filters down in how we view the world and live our lives.
Mm, wow. I love where you're at right now, Sarah. I very much appreciate that. And speaking of intellectual integrity, you've got it because you, as you said, you're. If I'm hearing you right, you're saying you're committed to the Lord, um, but you have doubts, you have questions,
Mhm.
and you are needing some assurance of some things that maybe you've been told but haven't necessarily observed or experienced or understood
Mhm.
about the person of God, about his character, and maybe about some specific Bible claims. Is that about right?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. I love where you're at. Many men and women have been there before you, me among them. And I really, yeah, I appreciate that you're in a season of seeking. And
Mhm.
God makes that promise. If you seek me, you will find me. And it's a hard process, the seeking process. It's a lot of work, which is why I think some people don't really progress deeper in their faith. Um, there's this kind of a weird idea, and I'm not sure where it came from, that if you have doubts and if you have real tough questions about God, it means that your faith is weakening, but
Mm.
actually it's a sign of strengthening. That's a sign of active maturation in the Christian faith, to be able to ask those deep questions and say, is God who he said he is? And actually follow through on that is huge and really important. So, would you say your main hangup is the creation thing, or was it just that your curiosity was piqued from watching that podcast?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's my main hang up, but it is a big deal to me that I'm able to make sense of things.
Mm-hmm.
And especially I've been having recent conversations on thinking about parenting. I'm not a parent, but thinking about it and like what would I teach my kids about the origin of the world and how would I explain the stories of the Bible? Am I supposed to take things literally, and is that in contradiction with science, or like how are we making this work all together?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. You don't just want to spoon feed down a generation what you've been spoon fed by the last generation, but didn't actually
Exactly.
take or believe. I appreciate that. We shouldn't do that with anything, political views, religious views, whatever. Um, okay, yeah, I want to dive into this with you. Afterwards, I would love to ask you what your main hang up is, and maybe we can explore that if you're up
Okay.
for it. We don't have to,
Sure.
but okay. So, I'm not going to go through the Genesis story because you have a background in Christianity, you've read the
Mhm.
Bible, you understand what Genesis says, right? Um, but I do think it's helpful in this conversation to kind of outline some of the main views um, that people come to from Genesis about the creation story. And so you mentioned specifically evolution and questions about that and how did God do it? So all of these people can come together and say, in the beginning, God, right? And we can all stand on that fact and say, okay, God is the one who did this. How he did this and the timeline and all of that is kind of the question. So in one camp, you've got what's called young Earth creationism, which is sometimes abbreviated YEC. And there are a couple different flavors of this view, but basically the idea is that those days in the Bible were literal 24-hour periods. That, well, day one, God did this. That was a day, as in we experience it on Earth today. Okay, so 6 literal days of creation. And then a seventh day of rest, of course. And then the second main camp is called Old Earth Creationism, or OEC. And this view, again, there are many, maybe like 12 different iterations that I know of that believe that the day is a day age. So in that time, the word yom, the word for day, was used in many different ways. It could be like in the day of King such and such, which meant like the years of his reign, or different ways of using that word. So in old Earth creationism, the view is that those 6 periods of time could have been millions of years. They could have been thousands of years, but they're understood to coincide with the fossil record that we see. But old Earth creationists don't believe in macroevolution. Okay. So now we move to the third view, which is theistic evolution, which is like old Earth creationism, but they believe that, so not only is the Earth as old as it looks according to the fossil record, but that God used evolution kind of as his paintbrush or as his tool to create the world. And some people might come to this view and say, well, but evolution is, so grueling and awful. Why would God use this process that favors death to create life? And their response might be something like, well, it's good, like creation is good, but groaning, as the Bible says. So all of creation is groaning, waiting to be restored. So God could use a process that was sort of broken in a way to create something beautiful. And he's a restorative God, so that's how he can do that. Then there's a fourth view, which is not considered an evangelical view. But some people who are deists might read through the creation story and say, God created evolution itself as a kind of like clock, as a mechanism, and then he wound it up and then he let it go. And so the rest happened, this random natural selection, all of this stuff. It wasn't that he was guiding it in any way, but he very carefully crafted the mechanism of macroevolution, and then he let nature kind of take its course. That deistic view is pretty niche, and I think a lot of people who take stock, especially in the New Testament, don't really believe in the deistic view because they see God as very active. I mean, he sent his son to the earth to save humanity and all of creation. That's a very active thing for him to do. So he does involve himself in humanity and nature and all that. So anyway, those are kind of some 4 overarching views, if that's helpful. Hearing a bit about those camps, which one do you think you might fit most into as of now?
Right now, good question. I think I would go an old Earth view, potentially with some evolution. I because I want to not have to turn a blind eye to what is happening in the science field. And I guess a question around that would be like, how are you deciding who you listen to and who you trust for scientific information? Because I'm so far removed from that world.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely, it's hard to figure out who to listen to, especially when the voices are quite conflicting. Um, I think a good rule of thumb is you follow truth. You follow truth wherever it's leading, even if it's going somewhere unexpected or even if it's coming from a source that's unexpected, maybe someone who you really disagree with politically or whatever. Um, all truth is God's truth. And the Bible says by that the spirit of truth will lead you into all truth. So we don't have to be afraid if we learn something that's maybe really surprising, or that maybe even someone says, well, that's not a Christian way of thinking. If it's true, it's something we need to put our stock in.
Mhm.
That's kind of my policy. And some of the most exciting science ever done was done by someone who started an experiment expecting it to go one way, and it went completely the opposite direction, and they got results that they were not expecting and did not know what to do with, and they were on the cusp of a great discovery. And so it's really exciting. Something like that is exciting, and that can happen in our faith journey as well. So, I am a biologist. I have a master's degree in biology. I've written peer-reviewed papers and spoken at conferences and things like that on my research. So I do take science very seriously, but I don't like those posters that say, I believe in science, because science is just a tool that was invented for us to understand the truth. Science itself is not the truth. Science is a process to find truth, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
So lots of people might come to a set of data and interpret that data and come away with different conclusions. Um, in science, you don't prove anything. You just form probabilities, generate probabilities. So if something is 93% probable, you could say, okay, this is definitely, well, in like the empirical method, basically, if it's 80% or more, that's statistically viable. So you could say, okay, this is true if it's 80% or more. But you don't ever prove anything 100%. At least I've never heard of anything being proven 100% by the sciences. Sciences can guide you in the right direction. Um, so yeah, I believe that science works, but I don't believe in science like I believe in God. It's just a tool. That being said, with the evolution question, there are different kinds of evolution, and that's where the conversation gets really sticky. Um, so in biology, we often talk about microevolution and phenotypic plasticity, which is basically a fancy word for saying, things change how they look over time. And we know that that's true, because if you go to an old museum or something and you look at the clothes that people wore, at that time, they're like little doll clothes. They were all like these little tiny, tiny people with like these tiny dresses. And you go into a museum like that and you're like, how did women ever fit into these tiny little clothes? But things were different back then with, the nutrition and genetics and stuff. Nowadays, people are a lot bigger, taller. Our teeth are a little bit different. And that doesn't mean that macroevolution is happening, meaning we are turning into a different species. It just means that we're changing over time, which is, we know that things change over time. You have a Bernedoodle, right? And he is the product of phenotypic plasticity, because someone bred a Bernese Mountain Dog with a poodle to create this animal, or maybe, two Bernedoodles. I'm not sure how he came to be. He's delightful. However he came to be, we love him. We're glad he's here.
Nice.
But, imagine that someone found, oh gosh, this is going dark. I didn't mean, just go with me here, that his fossils were found. Okay. I don't mean any harm to him. Imagine his fossils were found next to a Bernese Mountain Dog fossils, right? Long down the line. They would clearly say, oh, these are two different species because these dogs look so different. But they're not. They're both Canis familiaris. Like all these species of dogs, pugs, whatever, they look so different from each other. Like a pug and a husky are super different, but they are both the same species. They just look very, very different because they've been bred under different conditions over time. So I think a lot of what we see, such as Darwin's finch experiment, his really famous finch experiment, if you read through that, I mean, it's clearly phenotypic plasticity. It's clearly that there were things in nature that were changing the shapes of the beaks of these birds because of weather conditions or what they were eating and what food was available, and population dynamics, which bird was breeding with which and all of that, which changed over time. But that was not speciation. They were not different animals. So I don't really think that Darwinian macroevolution as it's written is physiologically possible, nor has ever been observed. I think much of what we see is microevolution, which is you can see it under a microscope. I shouldn't say proven, but like you can do it under a microscope. You can breed a population of guppies that have super, super long tails. And you could just do that in your dorm room, over the course of a few months. And you've got a new weird looking fish, which is really cool, but you haven't created a new species. That's a really long answer to the evolution question, but I wanted to be sure I answered a little bit more of it. Was that helpful at all, or did I go down a
Yeah.
rabbit hole?
No, I really appreciate all of that information and stuff for me to think about. Yeah, I guess I know I'm kind of asking more personal questions, hopefully you don't mind, but like, how do you understand the account of creation in scripture as being compatible with what you see in science? Like, do you believe in the historical Adam and Eve? And does that affect your way of how you see the trickle down?
I do believe in the historical Adam and Eve. I probably lean towards kind of your view where you're at with old earth creationism. I think that makes most sense of what we see in the sciences, and especially with what we see in physics with the speed of light and the acceleration of the universe and all of that. That's not really compatible with a young earth view. But all of that being said, for anyone out there watching or listening, we're all brothers and sisters in Christ. You're not saved, or it's not a salvific issue. So if you're watching this and you're young earth creationist, you're like, well, I'm just going to turn this off because she's different from me. We're all brothers and sisters. I'm not saying that you're, not saved or anything like that. So hear me there. This is a secondary issue, much like, baptism, sprinkle or dunk. We can talk about that. It doesn't make you saved or not, in my view. So yeah, I understand the creation narrative to be so it follows this ancient Hebrew form, which was this poetic construct, which was basically 7 stanzas where you have, these two next to each other, those two next to each other, those two next to each other, and then a concluding thought. And that was really common, especially in Near Eastern literature from that time. And so I think while it is poetic in form, it does describe something true that happened. And that was a big deal for that time because all these other people groups were believing that there was a chaotic beginning to the earth, that it was, one god kills another god and then makes that god into the stuff of earth, versus this God who created ex nihilo. He used his words to speak these things into being, which was just incredible. I have a lot of questions about him creating Adam from the earth, from the stuff of the earth. So he did not create Adam ex nihilo as he did other things, and God said, let there be, and it was. That's a different sort of process. And then, bringing Eve out of his his rib, which again is very poetic because she was not brought from his feet to be beneath him. She was not brought from his head to be above him. She was brought from his side to be his partner, his equal. There's something really beautiful and balanced about that view. So yeah, there's a poetic element there, but it's also descriptive of something that I believe was true. So I believe that Adam and Eve were two historically individual people. And there was a study done, I forget what year it was. It wasn't that long ago, probably less than 50 years ago, studying what's called mitochondrial DNA. Have you by chance heard of this?
No, I don't
Okay,
think
so
so.
interestingly, your mother has left her imprint on you in your mitochondria, and her mother has left her imprint on her through her mitochondria. In the same way that you were in your when you were in your mother's womb, your DNA was involved with her body. So your traces of your DNA are still in your mom's body and any other children she's carried. Even if she miscarried that child's unique DNA will be in her body forever. And so there's this exchange of genetic information between mother and child. And with the mitochondria, it's specifically down through the female line. Okay. So a bunch of scientists got together and they were like, we want to see how far back we can go with this thing. We want to see how far back the mitochondrial timestamp essentially goes to just like see where it stops. And they, took a bunch of different lines and traced it back. I could send you the link to the paper. It's pretty interesting. And they basically found one individual woman and they called her mitochondrial Eve for lack of a better word. And a bunch of people were like, okay, what do we do with this? This is a problem because went all the way down to one individual person. Is it possible that maybe there was a huge famine and at one point all of humanity died except for this one woman? Because it looks like everyone came from this one woman. So it's kind of been a head scratcher since that time. But I find that really interesting. And again, it does not prove that Eve was an individual historical person. But it's certainly curious and worth considering. So yeah, I believe that Adam and Eve were two individual people, not like a race or anything like that.
Thanks.
Before we jump into some of her bigger issues, which I know you wanted to get to, Xandra, which I hope we get back to, Sarah, because I love your questions. I also wanted to give Anna and Christie a chance to ask some follow-up questions as well. Or just feedback.
Yeah. I think just going off of Sarah's question, I'd just love to know how the further you've gone to know just information about science, like how that's strengthened your faith.
Oh, good question. You're Christie, right?
I'm Anna.
You're Anna. Okay, I couldn't tell because it says Anna and Christie, and I didn't know who was who. Okay, Anna, good to meet you, and Christie, good to meet you. Okay. Sorry, I just wanted to be sure I didn't say the wrong thing for your name. Yeah. Science, it's interesting. Like I meet some Christians who learn that I'm a scientist and they're instantly like kind of skeptical of me. They're like, one guy the other day, actually yesterday, he said to me, well, you should come down to my church if you want to learn the Bible. Because, he assumed I had never read the Bible because I was a scientist. I was like, well, I also have a degree in theology. So he was like, oh, okay. He didn't really know what to say about that. But theology was once known as the queen of the sciences. And it was sort of, one of these ways that we could study to understand more about God. And science and faith historically have not been at odds. It's more of a recent thing. And maybe, even as early as like 1700s, 1800s, before that, they weren't really seen as conflicting. And it's very much a cultural thing, which I think boils down to atheism versus theism, which is very clearly a conflict. Those are two opposing views. God doesn't exist. God does exist. Like, okay, we're going to have conflict about that. But science is an incredible gift that was given to humanity by God, in my view. There's this ancient Latin saying, Deus scientiarum dominus. God is king of the sciences, or God is Lord of the sciences. And I love that. It's his, it belongs to him, and he delights in it. And I think he gets great pleasure from us when we do science, when we're, up until midnight in the lab and our lab coat is getting stinky and our goggles are getting foggy because we're sweating and exhausted and we've been in there forever. But we're just like, we're working hard because we want to know. We want to know what's happening. We want to understand. There's not, this idea that God is anti-knowledge or anti-understanding. It doesn't really it kind of makes sense. Actually, I have my Bible right here. The other day I was talking with my friend about this, and he's an atheist. And he's like, listen, I really appreciate your lifestyle. I appreciate what you do, but I just could never believe what you believe. And I was like, okay, well, why not? And he's like, well, because God is anti-understanding. And I said, what makes you say that? And he brought me to this verse in Proverbs 3, which I'm sure you've heard before, which says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths. Be not wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord. Turn away from evil. So he's like, okay, like, don't lean on your own understanding. God is clearly saying, like, don't be a scientist. Don't be curious. Don't use your brain. And I was like, it does kind of sound like that. So I was like, well, let's just keep reading a little further, because sometimes, when you get the context, it makes more sense. So we kept reading down there, and sure enough, it didn't take us long. Down at verse 13, it says, blessed is the one who finds wisdom and the one who gets understanding. The gain from her is better than the gain from silver, and her profit better than gold. The Lord by wisdom founded the earth. By understanding he established the heavens. By his knowledge the deeps broke open and the clouds dropped down the dew. My son, do not lose sight of these. So he's saying, don't lose sight of understanding. Don't lose sight of wisdom and knowledge. These are good things. They're better than gold. Get these things, do the science, basically. Like, be curious, use your brain. It's more that our own understanding will never get us far enough. Our own understanding is so limited because we are these feeble mortal beings. And in order to get farther, we need the wisdom and knowledge of God, which can expand our horizons and extend us to places we would never be able to get to by ourselves. This kind of like divine knowledge, divine wisdom that comes and helps us. So it's not saying don't use your understanding. It's saying don't cut yourself short by saying, oh, I can figure this all out just by using my tiny little human brain. You can't. We need to be more humble. So I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, that's kind of an interesting conversation I had recently on the same topic.
How about you, Christy?
Yeah, I have a couple questions. One is just kind of like a quick curiosity. Wondering if you have ever come across like people these days who are talking about intelligent design, and like Stephen Meyer. I don't know if you've heard of those camps, and I just was curious about what you thought of that.
Yeah, so I am familiar with Stephen Meyer. Gosh, I would love to meet him someday. I would just love to like have a coffee with him and ask him a bunch of questions, because I want to know more about his actual view. I think Stephen Meyer's pretty balanced, at least in a lot of things that I've written. He's kind of like, here's this intelligent design is essentially saying, okay, Darwinian macroevolution does not work in biology because blank. Or astronomy. I mean, sometimes it's not only biology, sorry. Yeah, so there's a lot of, he does some cosmology writing and some exploration in some different scientific fields on that. And I find that really helpful, irreducible complexity. That's more maybe on the Michael Behe side and stuff like that. But they don't really say like, hey, here's what I believe about the timeline of the Earth because of this. It feels more in response to the evolution question than anything else. So I appreciate it for that reason, but it's a little bit more of a general response than, say, old Earth creationism or theistic evolution or something like that. Yeah.
And then my second question, this isn't like fully formed. But I guess I was wondering about like your background and experience in college, like as you were learning, as you were studying your degree, and like I'm sorry, I don't like fully know if you were like Christian at that point, or if you were what type of university you were going to, and how that was like forming your study and understanding of science and God like at that point. And then if there were like sorry, adding complications, but then like how maybe did your journey with that like continue changing after university, just like as a something.
That's a great question, Christy. Do we have another 2 hours, Janelle? No.
No, I want you to tell your story though, because it's wonderful. They need to hear it. They don't know it.
Right. No, I love the question. I wish I could say that I have been 100% faithful to God, but I have not. And, I really appreciate where Sarah is right now, because she has these questions about God and she has these doubts about God, but she's pressing in instead of pushing away. And I pushed away, which is always disaster. So I think about it like when you're learning to ride a bike. I remember like when my dad was teaching me to ride a bike, he was like holding the back and pushing me along. And he's like, now when you start to lean and you feel like you're going to fall, you actually have to lean into that fall and turn your tire in, and that will keep you up. If you turn away because you get scared, it's going to slam you into the ground. And that's part of learning to balance, right? When you're pedaling and all that. So, Sarah's doing it the right way because she's turning into it. She's like, let's do the work. Let's ask the questions. I was pretty broke when I went to college. So I did my first 2 years at a community college, because I got a scholarship for free. And then I was going to transfer to a 4-year university to finish out my final 2 years, and trying to start my, my grad courses early, my senior year, which I did end up doing. So, but I took some time in between that to move to a country, and a third world country, and basically work in the slums with some AIDS orphans and teach English and French while I was there. And so while I was there, I had some really awful experiences of suffering. And I think I may have been a little young to move out of country by myself. I was 20, and, I shaved my head and bought a one-way ticket to this country, and kind of had this like vigilante attitude, like, yeah, I'm going to save the world and it's going to be great. And I know everything. I did not know everything. And I got majorly humbled. I got, grade 4 malaria, thought I was going to die. Didn't have access to running water or electricity while I was there. And I didn't really invite the Lord along. I just was like, I'm going to go and be a good person and do this thing. And that's definitely not how we're supposed to do it. You can have the best intentions in the world, and if you're not in step with the Spirit, it's just not going to go well. So I came home kind of an empty shell of myself, and I was, terrified of men, terrified of everybody. And I was kind of like a mean dog. Like a dog that's been, attacked, that now is like super aggressive, because they're like, if I'm aggressive, no one's going to attack me again. And that's kind of how I was. Not a pleasant person to be around at all. And and during this time, I was also like, I had the intellectual questions, but they were kind of like a front to the deeper questions of like, where was God when that happened? Where was God with the suffering and all that? And so I had I had enough scientific knowledge to formulate these like phantom questions, or like these, facade questions that I wore like a mask. And, but it didn't help that the staff at that 4-year university, when I came back to the States, at that time, they were very anti-Christian. And so when you start your new classes that week, and you go for the first time, they give you the syllabus, they tell you a little bit about what the course is, what to expect when the exams are, and all that stuff. Each one of my professors that first year back, my junior year, they all gave the same spiel on that first day, which was basically, God does not exist. We're not going to talk about God or ask questions about God in this class. This is about science, and was really about scientism, which they didn't admit, which we can talk about later. And so if you bring up any questions, or if you question Darwinian evolution, you will be dismissed from this class immediately. And they all made that same speech. And I felt so scared and ashamed, like almost like a witch hunt, like, oh man, I hope no one finds out that I believe in God. Because I was really mad at God, but I still believed in him. It was kind of a weird introduction to my 4-year university experience there. And actually looking back on it, extremely inappropriate that they did that. So yeah, the experience in the beginning was pretty bad. Mostly bad because of my making. And I definitely strayed, I dated guys I shouldn't have dated, and was not walking with the Lord. I was just a really angry person. And there were a few people who saw through the anger and saw through the aggression and saw it for what it was, which was actually weakness. And they took great pity on me and were extremely gracious and continued, I don't know why, but they continued being kind to me and inviting me to their little gatherings and whatever. And they were the most kind, godly people I think I've ever encountered in my life. And I owe them such an incredible debt of gratitude for what they did for me, because I am not sure that I would do that for someone else who was like me at that time. I'm not sure I would have the patience for it. So it took, long story short, it took God hitting me with a car to stop me in my tracks and bring me back to him. And he did bring me back to him, and I have not strayed ever since, and I repented for my silliness and the time that I was basically just running away from him. And I kind of, made an oath. I said, Lord, I'll never do that again. I will be with you now and forever. So, and I haven't walked away from him ever since, even when it's gotten hard. So he's worth it. And I'm so glad that Sarah is doing it the way that she's doing it, which is so much better from the way I did it, which is the hard way. Anyway, I don't want to go into too many more details that take up too much of the time, but he seeks the one who's been driven away, is what the Bible says in Ecclesiastes. He seeks what has been driven away. And that was me. I was very much driven away from him and drove myself from him, but he just kept pursuing and pursuing and pursuing, and won me back to himself.
Xandra, I'd like to ask you a follow-up question to that. How did you reconcile the suffering? I know before we hit record here, you talked a little bit about some people that you love, someone in particular who's going through a season of intense suffering. I know that we know people who are going through that as well. And it can be very jolting to your faith to witness that, to witness what seems very unfair and merciless, And so I'm just wondering how you reconcile that now as someone who won't leave him. Where are you at that?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Janelle. I think I somehow got the wrong idea of God into my head at one point, and I don't know where that came from, but the idea is everything that happens because God makes it happen, because he's sovereign. So, if there's so many awful things I could say on this podcast that I won't. Just imagine, fill in the blank. If something evil, terrible happens to you, God made that thing happen to you. And it could be mysterious. It could be because, he wants to make you stronger, or he's going to make something else happen. But this is kind of the narrative that I received over time. And I want to tell you today, that is a false narrative. God is sovereign. But, when my friend was drugged and raped at a party, I'm not going to say to her, oh, you know what? God made that happen to you because he's got something in mind for you in the future. No, I'm going to mourn and lament with her. I am going to say that was an injustice. And we are going to cry out to God for healing and for justice for this, because it breaks his heart as much as it breaks ours that this happened. He is a compassionate God. If you want to know how God feels and thinks about suffering, we should look at the life of Jesus. Because if you want to know the Father, if you want to see the Father, you look at the Son, right? And what did Jesus do with suffering? What did he do to people who were apoplectic, falling into the fire, people who were demon possessed? Did he say, oh, just bear it because this is God's plan for you? No, he cast those demons out. He brought healing to people who never thought they would be healed. How did he view death? I mean, he brought Lazarus up out of the grave. Now he lamented, he wept at the grave of Lazarus, but he had the power to undo that death. And remember all the bodies that came up out of the grave, after Jesus' crucifixion and death and resurrection. I mean, he has the power to undo death. So if God's modus operandi, if you will, is to undo suffering and undo death, and that's his ultimate plan for the future, I don't think we can say with confidence that he just kind of willy-nilly makes suffering land on people to make them stronger. That's actually a really Muslim view. When you read the Quran and the Hadiths, it's very much that, Allah apportions certain sufferings to certain people, even certain temptations that he knows will make them sin, which is not our view of God. That is not the view of the Christian God. Our God is a God of compassion. He's also a God who gave us free will because he's a good father. And I so oftentimes meet people who were like me, who said, someone did something evil and God let that happen, therefore God is evil. And that's not fair, because God is not evil. He's good. He's the one who wants to. We have an adversary. We can't forget that. We have an adversary who's prowling around like a lion, seeking to kill and destroy. And we have to be on guard for him. So I don't believe that all suffering is from God. I do believe that sometimes God disciplines the ones that he loves. And I do believe that sometimes God says no to us when we want him to say yes, and that no might cause us some suffering, right? His answer might cause us discomfort. He's more concerned with our holiness than our happiness. So I'm not going to sit here and say, he will never do anything to make you uncomfortable, because that's not true, because he's a good parent. But I don't take the narrative that every evil thing that happened because God let it happen. What other God have you heard of who himself suffered on behalf of the weak to set them free, who took that suffering onto himself? So when we ask the question, where is God in the suffering? He's in it. He's in the suffering with us. Remember the words of the Bible that say, oh, Jerusalem, because your heart, or because of the heart of my daughter Jerusalem has been broken, so my heart has been broken. I think that's in Jeremiah. I'm not remembering the exact chapter and verse on that. Sorry. So what breaks our heart breaks his heart. So I think it took me some time to learn that, people can do evil things, and evil things can happen because we've got the world, the flesh, and the devil. And these are our three things that are coming after us day after day to try and weaken our faith. And we have to be wary and know that, yes, God can redeem the suffering, but that doesn't mean he incites every evil thing that happens to us. That's just not who he is at all. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it's good. I guess the follow-up would be if he doesn't incite it, but he allows it, and he could relieve it, but he doesn't. How do you deal with the angst of crying out to him and him saying, not right now? That's a pretty hard place to be.
It is a hard place to be. I think of the saints in Revelation that stand before the throne and say, how long, O Lord, how long until you bring justice onto the earth? This has been the cry of the saints from time immemorial. That we are waiting for the redemption of our bodies, for the redemption of creation, and for this time when suffering will be no more. And his timing will be perfect. But if he were to remove all of that now, what would that look like? For a good answer, I think we can look at one of Jesus' parables, which was the parable of the wheat and the tares. And if you remember in that story, there's a good farmer who goes out and he sows this beautiful wheat seed into this field, this fresh, wonderful upturned soil. Everything is soft and wet and just ready to produce this beautiful crop of wheat. But in the night, an enemy comes and sows all of these bad seeds, all of these weeds, these like choking vine weeds. And so when the baby plants grow up, the farmers go out into their master's field and they see there's good and bad growing together. And they ask him, what are we going to do? You know, all this bad stuff is choking out the good stuff. Should we go out and just try and weed out the weeds right now so they have room to flourish? And his answer is no. Because if you pull up the tares now, the good stuff will come up too. The wheat will come up. So we're going to wait until everything is mature, and then we're going to harvest everything at once, and then we'll separate the bad from the good. That's the picture that God gives us. So we are living in a world where evil feels like it's increasing, and that's because it is. Mm-hmm. But we're also living in a world where good is increasing, because God is bringing his kingdom to earth right now. So there are good and evil growing up together. If he were to tear all the evil out of the world right now, I would be destroyed. You know why? Because there's good and evil in my own heart right now. It's not like, oh, she's good, he's good, she's bad, he's bad. Dostoevsky wrote this really well in his book. I forget what it was. Which book it was, sorry.
The Brothers Karamazov? No?
Oh,
no,
it
I don't
wasn't
know.
Dostoevsky. This was in the Gulag Archipelago. So this man had basically been imprisoned in the gulags and had faced awful evil. And people were asking him about good and evil. And he said, you know, it would be so much more simple if like some people were good and some people were evil, because then you could just get rid of the evil people. But the line between good and evil runs down the middle of every human heart. So if God were to tear all the evil out of the world, he'd be tearing us apart right now. And that's just the fact of the matter. We have not been fully redeemed yet. And the same can be said for the world at large. So yes, there is this suffering. Yes, there is this evil. We grieve, but not as those who have no hope. We know the end of the story. The end of the story is all the evil and all the suffering will be removed. And that's something that we can look forward to. My friend of 25 years just passed away in February, this past February. And I was super pregnant at the time. And, you know, she was one of my dearest friends, and she had gotten sick out of the blue really quickly. She got this weird cough. She thought it was just like a winter laryngitis. She lost her voice, and they found that she had cancer in her throat. And so they did some tests, and they found that there was cancer in her entire body, her brain, her spine, stage 4 cancer everywhere, all over her body. And she went from feeling mostly good to all of a sudden, you don't have long to live. And it was extremely hard I was with her when she got the call from the doctor saying she had stage 4 cancer. And I just stayed with her all day, and we just cried all day because, you know, some people recover from stage 4, but usually it's a bad, really bad outcome. And we had a really, really beautiful conversation the night before she died. She passed away that next morning. And she just had such peace. You know, she was smiling and laughing. It was so incredible to see how God met her in her suffering. And I don't understand why she had to die when she did, or why she passed away. Was it that the evil one wanted to get her off the face of the earth because she was a light? Was it just, you know, that, you know, we live in a world where there's cancer that takes over people's bodies sometimes? I don't have the answer, and I don't need to have the answer as to why it happened, because I have the answer as to what's the end of the story. And yeah, it's a good ending. It's a good ending. I know that I'm going to see my friend someday. And like I said, we grieve. Like, it's good to cry, it's good to be sad, but not as those who have no hope. And when you look at any other ideology, any other religion, what's their answer to suffering? I mean, we can explore them. No one has as good as an answer as the God who suffers with us and has a plan to completely remove suffering someday. I mean, in Hinduism, it's karma. You did something in a previous life that made that suffering come on you now, and you just have to deal with it. In Islam, it's inshallah. It just happened. It was God's will that you would suffer, so you just have to suffer. And don't even get me started on atheism, what Richard Dawkins calls a blind, pitiless indifference. There's no good or evil. Suffering is just a biological phenomenon because you are a physiological creature who experiences pain. And that's just the way that it is. But when I look at the Bible, when I think about the person of Jesus, I see a God who hung on a cross and suffered to spare you and I the ultimate suffering. Are we going to suffer in this life? Yeah. In fact, he promises us, if we're true to him, if we're his true disciples, we can expect to suffer, an element of suffering. But the sting of death is gone. The sting of death is no more. So even though we will face death and die, like my friend Chris, who was laughing and smiling the night before she died, the sting of death was gone. She knew where she was going. She was convinced of it. Someone described it like a little girl who is laying on her stomach in the late evening on the living room floor, and she's playing with her toys, and she's starting to get kind of sleepy. And the next thing she remembers is waking up in her bed, in her bedroom the next morning. Now, that little girl fell asleep, but she did not experience sleep per se. So death will happen to us, but it's not something that we are going to experience in the way that we would without Christ. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that makes sense, but...
No. It does make sense. And I really appreciate you sharing on that topic, Xandra. Any final thoughts from Sarah, Anna, or Christy before we wrap up with one final question for Xandra here? This has been really beautiful. Thank you. It's never enough time. It's never enough time with you. I'd love some final wrap-up thoughts from any of you. And if you have a final question, I'm sure she might answer it. I don't know for sure, but I'm thinking maybe she will.
I just would like to say I'm deeply grateful for your journey and that you've chosen to share that. And thank you. I would ask, I don't know how long of a question this is, but just your quick perspective on the multiverse theory.
The multiverse theory. Love the multiverse theory. I love it because it's so silly. So basically, is it possible that the hold on, people might not. Do you want to explain the multiverse, Sarah, or do you want me to?
I'm not qualified for that.
I disagree. You strike me as a super intelligent person. Well, I'll give it a shot. The multiverse theory basically says there are so many universes out there. We are just in one of many, many, many universes. And so because there are so many universes, statistically, there's a pool, if you will, large enough for life to exist. Because the fact that life exists in the universe at all is kind of preposterous. It's like 1 in 10 to the power of 10 to the power of 230 or something like that, which basically, if you took all the material in the universe and converted it into paper and tried to write that number on both sides in 12-point font of that paper, that would not be enough paper to express how improbable life is. So it's a really large number. Basically, we don't have an answer for why life is here, which is why some scientists are like, oh, it's panspermiogenesis, like aliens put life on Earth, because it could not have just happened here by itself. So this idea is, well, you've got all these universes, so statistically it would have to happen like that. Could the multiverse exist? It could. If it did, would we have any way of observing it? No. There's no way we would be able to show that the multiverse exists. And if it did exist, would that get rid of the God problem? I mean, what do you guys think? Do you think the multiverse would disprove God?
Have to think about it.
Christy says no. Why are you saying no, Christy?
I just, all I can say is I believe he's bigger than that, but maybe that's just too far removed outside of
You're totally right.
like he's just soft. He's bigger than all of that, or even like our human understanding of what the multiverse like would be if it did exist.
You're totally right, Christy. He could be bigger than the multiverse. If he created one universe, he could have created a bunch of universes. Why not? He's God. So people have kind of invented this idea of the multiverse. Actually, it started with Edgar Allan Poe, interestingly. I was able to find its origin with one of his fictional works. To try and say, well, God did not specifically create this universe and this solar system and this planet because it looks very fine-tuned. So it could exist, but we could never observe it, and it wouldn't disprove the existence of God. So I think it's a really fun idea, but it's not scientific. It's basically sci-fi. It's basically just a fun idea that has no scientific background whatsoever. I did see Sir Roger Penrose present his idea of the oscillating universe in Oxford when I was studying there, because I'm part of the Oxford Scientific Society. So I was able to listen to some of these incredible scientists share some of their research. And he has this idea that like universes start and end and start and end and start and end like beads on a string. And so we're the last one, right? And someone asked him in this forum, okay, so but we know that it's impossible for us to have one more big like crunch because of the composition of the universe. So how do you explain that? And his answer was, well, this is just the last universe. But which seemed kind of ad hoc to me. So scientifically, it doesn't add up. It's a fun idea, but it doesn't even do what it is meant to do, which is disprove God, who created these things on purpose. That's my quick. I've given a whole lecture on the multiverse, so that's my quick response, which wasn't very quick. Sorry.
Thank you.
Final thoughts, Anna and Christy.
I don't have any questions. I'm just super grateful to have gotten to know you more and learn from you. Like, it's just so rich of a time. So, and your story is incredible too. And I just, I really value everything that you've had to say. So thank you so much. Really looking forward to learning more and thank you. And just reading more of your work.
I have just one more question. You kind of talked about this earlier, but you kind of mentioned that like your questions on like scientific things were kind of like a front from like the deep hard questions, and I'd love to get your input on like what you would say to somebody that have gone through really hard things, and maybe don't question God's existence, but maybe just question His goodness in like really hard times. Like, okay, God was there, but like, why did He allow it? Or like, just those hard questions.
Yeah. Looking back on my experience, the people who made that difference to me that I kind of mentioned to you before, who were just really kind and they were really present, they weren't answering my questions. They were just loving me. And I'm a Christian apologist, so I don't like the idea of like, oh, just love people into the kingdom and don't ever share the gospel or explain what you believe. Like, that's not the view I take. But in that season, I did not need answers. I needed people who loved me and were going to take care of me. There were other seasons where I needed the intellectual answers, and I'm really grateful for that when it was needed. So I think part of being a good brother and sister is knowing what somebody needs and then giving it. to them. Like in the book of James, he says, what good is it if you see a brother and sister who's lacking in daily food and clothing, and you're like, may it go well with you, go away and be warmed and filled, but you don't do anything for them. Like, your religion is empty and worthless. And I think as brothers and sisters in Christ, we need to be ready to meet each other with where we're at and the very real needs that we have in that season. And so for me, when I was going through a season of suffering and questioning God's goodness, I just needed to be loved by him, and he was going to do that through other people. Which I know is not a very good Christian apologist answer. Sometimes we don't know the answer, and sometimes the answers do more harm than good. Like, oh, God is going to use this for a reason, or, oh, this is going to make you stronger. Well, those things might be true, but oftentimes we don't need to hear that in the moment. We just need to be loved and to be met in our suffering. So thanks for your question, Anna.
Xandra, you've gotten this question before. It's our last one that we always do. The Finding Something Real podcast is about finding restoration, eternity, authenticity, and love in relationship with Jesus. Which of those things, restoration, eternity, authenticity, or love, stands out to you the most in your life right now, and why?
Right now, it's eternity. It's eternity, knowing that there's more, knowing that this light momentary affliction will not compare to the weight of glory that is waiting for us. In New Zealand, I was researching some interesting forest creatures, and one of them is this beautiful moth called the puriri. And the puriri is this beautiful marbled green wings, and it's the largest moth. It's huge. It's just this beautiful thing. And I was studying its life cycle, and I learned that it lives for 6 years as a little grub in the trees, like eating dead wood and hiding in the dark, and all these animals are trying to eat it, for 6 years. It's got to struggle for survival. And then it finally emerges as this huge, beautiful butterfly to fly free. And guess how long it lives with wings? Throw out a guess.
A very short amount of time.
Yeah, it's 2 days. It lives for 2 days and then it dies. And I was like, that's not fair. That's so not fair. It struggles and suffers for 6 years in the darkness and the solitude and the cold. And then it's got this freedom, these glorious wings, and it goes out into the sky and the light. And it's so short. And the Lord showed me that in the Christian economy, it's flipped. Our suffering is just a moment. It's real and it's hard, but it does not compare to an eternity with wings. So the freedom that he is bringing us, which starts now, but will echo through the ages, gives me a lot of hope.
Amen. Xandra Grieme, thank you. We sure appreciate you. This has been a beautiful conversation. One of my favorites. Until next time.